Welcome to Creatively Down and Dirty. In these special episodes, we put our usual deck of question cards aside and take a deep dive into one project with its creator. We discuss everything from the initial spark, the high highs and the low lows during the making of it, to how it got released into the wide world and where it's at now. Let's get started. Our first guest is filmmaker Antony Crook, who, as we're recording this, is knee-deep in South by Southwest madness, where his new documentary feature about legendary Scottish band Mogwai has just premiered less than 72 hours ago to critical acclaim. Welcome to the show, Antony. Thank you so much for doing this. How are you feeling?
Thank you. Yeah, good. Pretty good, actually. Yeah, it's been quite a few days. The premiere was 2 days ago. Mogwai actually came out and played in support of the film. They played the night before, so Monday night. And
Nice.
yeah, it was great. It was quite intense, really, the screening. It was just the end of nearly 4 years of work for me. And I've never seen the film projected like that or a full sound mix. I've always seen it in small screens and, in earphones. And I watched it 50 feet across in a full kind of sound mix. And it was just loud and big and epic. And it was amazing. And my family were there and lots of friends and the band were there. And, we just had a great day. We've got one more screening tonight. In a couple of hours, actually.
Nice.
Yeah, it's my first time at South by Southwest. It's actually my first feature as well.
Wicked. You mentioned just before we started recording that, I hope it's all right to say, but it was your kids' first time at the cinema.
Yeah, the kids were there. I edited this film. I did everything on it, actually, mostly. And they've seen me kind of working on it for the last 3 years. And it's been such a big part of my life and, as a family, our lives. They travelled with me to Scotland. We travelled there in COVID to film it. We made a lot of sacrifices together. So to have them there, and the success it's had already and getting into South by Southwest was really exciting for us. It was the one we wanted. It was the biggest. It was the top of the pile. For those people that don't know, when you make a film, you can enter it into these film festivals, and they get thousands and thousands of submissions and they pick 100 or whatever, or 80. So it's amazing to get accepted. And South by Southwest was the big one for us, just because they're connecting to music and it just felt like the perfect fit. So we aimed to get in here and we did, and the kids are just very excited. It was just very exciting for us. And, it was quite emotional for me to be there after all this work. There's a lot of emotion in the film, and just to have the family there, and my 4-year-old girl was sat on my knee for most of the film, and it just made it all worthwhile.
Extra special.
It's been very difficult to do this, and how we did it, how we made it, and what I took on. So very, very happy. Yeah.
Wicked. Well, Mazel Tov. I cannot wait to really dig into all of that. And before we do that, I just want to give our audience a super quick bio on you, just for some context, if that's cool.
Sure.
You have to put on your American hat. Us Brits, we're not very good at listening to this stuff about ourselves, but sit back and take this in. Antony, you were born in Bolton, which, for those who don't know, and I had to triple check, is north of Manchester, and you're now based in upstate New York with your family. You started your career in photography, and your work has been featured in The Face, Dazed and Confused, British Vogue, ID, and the New York Times. You've shot everybody from Hockney to Snoop Dogg to David Byrne, and your prints are held in numerous private and public collections. And talk about Full Circle, a film that you made in 2010 about Mogwai went viral via Nowness, and off the back of that success, you were signed by Ridley Scott's production company, RSA, as a director. Your filmmaking has been described as spare, subtle realism, and your poetic style has proven a hit with numerous brands, including Porsche, Samsung, Rafa, Barber, and New Balance. That is quite a killer list of collaborators. However, today is all about your debut feature-length doc, If the Stars Had a Sound. It's a dreamy and evocative journey into Mogwai's music and fans. The first review, hot off the Austin Press, has described it as a true underdog story and a breathtaking look at community building. I do not honestly think that there is a bigger accolade than that. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How do you feel about hearing all of that about what you've done to date?
Yeah, I'll always wince when I hear my bio. I guess it's in my personality, I've been very lucky to work with the people I've worked with, and I love what I do. And Mogwai, it's kind of amazing. My journey into film started with them, and here we are with this first feature at South by Southwest with them.
So I've been lucky enough to see the film. It is an absolute gem and an incredible insight and access to Mogwai's creative process. The film's just premiered at South by Southwest, so the audience listening probably won't have seen it yet. But we're about to go into detail about the process of making it. So I wanted to ask you, if I may, to describe the film first, like what it's about, the vibe in your own words, and essentially paint a picture for the listeners.
Sure. The film originally was going to be a small tour film. The Mogwai were going to make their 10th studio album and then play shows in the Highlands of Scotland. They were going to do like a tour, and they booked all these shows in these amazing places, and they asked me to make a film about this, about the making of about the tour. And it was a small thing. It was actually going to be a small little kind of 20-minute little film. And then COVID arrived. We decided to continue making it, and from there it grew to what it is today, which is a kind of full history of the band and like a wider look at Glasgow, Scotland, like the history of storytelling, the kind of community in Glasgow, creative music, and a kind of wider look at other things.
You've got the Scots who are very reticent and quiet and shy, and you've got Scots when you get a drink in them at a ceilidh, just wild revellers. And all these things are contained in the culture that comes out of that country. And you see it in the art, and you see it in the storytelling, and you see it in the music. I think Mogwai are the best example of that dual nature.
It's not very traditional. I purposely didn't watch any music films for 3 years. I didn't want it to be like anything else. I didn't want it to resemble anything else, actually. A bit like Mogwai, really. It was like, I want it to be like its own thing. What they've done is their own thing and do it in their own way. And I wanted this film had to be consistent with that and consistent with how they are as artists. So the main thing about my film about Mogwai is you don't hear from the band in a traditional way. I recorded sit-down interviews with them because I just felt that's what you were supposed to do, actually. And then when I was editing it and putting it together, it just didn't feel as soulful and as beautiful to me. I wanted it to be more like we're like observing the band. I wanted it to be like an observational. So I moved away from us like hearing from the band traditionally, and it became about people talking about them rather than them talking about themselves. It just felt more contemplative doing it that way. When the band are on stage, they kind of backlit, and not a lot of people kind of know who they are, actually. And I just find that interesting. That's more like the KLF, it's that kind of thing. It's just interesting to me, that. So I wanted to just lean into that, actually. And Orion, who we both know, Orion Williams, the producer, who came in halfway through, he's been excellent and like a mentor to me on this project.
Amazing.
And he said something interesting, which I really liked. Like the first time he saw the rough cut edit, he said at the end of it, you feel really close to these guys and you feel like you've been on the journey with them and you feel like you know the band so well, and it's very personal and you feel very close and connected to them. But at the end of the film, you don't know who they are. Like, you don't know which one Martin is or who Barry is. You don't know.
You sort of don't need to.
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
In some way, it's like they are one. They are the music.
Whole thing.
Sometimes when I think we're talking about bands and artists and, people who are on stage or in front of the camera, it's much more about them. But actually, sometimes what people want to know is like what and why and how, sort of like the guts of something.
Yeah, totally. 100%. And like Mogwai have always said, and they say in the film, it's like, the music doesn't belong to them. Once they've made it, once they've released it, doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the fans.
That's right.
And it's up to them to put their own stories on it, and Mogwai will never tell you what the songs mean. They give them titles that don't mean anything. Like, Mogwai song titles are just these like ridiculous things they come up with. But it's quite punk in that way. They may as well just call them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 because they just make this work that just makes you feel a certain way. Have them sit and explain it just didn't feel as beautiful or as interesting to me. I wanted it to be more ambient, more of a mood piece. So that was the reason why we don't hear from them too much. I mean, because of the way it was made in COVID, and I live in New York and they live in Glasgow, and we couldn't travel. What I decided to do was like record like every phone call I had with Stuart Braithwaite, is one of the guys in the band and a very good friend of mine. And I started getting into the habit of recording all our Zoom calls and our phone calls throughout this time. We were like setting up the film and making it. I found those more interesting. Rather than a traditional interview, to me, to be invited into these little moments. These like bits of conversation between he and I, him trying to work out how they can make the record, is it even possible, and just the process. So in the film, you come in and out of these conversations that have been recorded between Stuart and I chatting, and that felt more precious and more intimate. And I wanted this film to operate in a more kind of emotional way. And I think hearing from the band in that way kept us in that kind of headspace, really, I guess.
And how would you describe the cinematography?
Well, when we started off with the project, when we were going to do this tour of Scotland with them, I wanted it to be a big cinematic experience. Like me and the cinematographer I work with, we're going to get like the best possible cameras. Like there's a camera just came out called the Ariel F. We wanted to get 3 of those and shoot it all on that. You know, my background's in photography, and I was very, very precious about the quality of the picture, and the optics are very important to me. And I kind of nerd out on creating like the most technically perfect picture you can.
Yeah.
So I came into it from that background. And then when COVID arrived and we started looking at other ways to film it, I abandoned, thankfully, this kind of preciousness I had about how we're going to shoot it. And so we just started looking at any kind of camera format we could use. There's like Zoom calls, and it was a crazy time, like spring 2020, when the world started changing and flights, airports were being closed, and we didn't know what was going on, and we were scrambling to figure out, this is when we very first started the film, how we could film it. I couldn't travel from New York to the US. They couldn't come to the US. Originally, they were going to record it in New York. So they booked a studio in Warwickshire that they could find where they could record. And I couldn't travel there, and they wouldn't allow a cinematographer in, because I was going to send like a DP in. It was actually Ula Ponticost. I don't know if you've ever worked with Ula.
Oh, yeah.
Ula was going to do it. Ula's a good friend. And Ula was going to go in with a camera, and I wasn't going to be there, which wasn't ideal. The idea of me not being there was like, I was really worried about that. And I was walking down the street in New York, just trying to figure out how I could film them recording. They were going into a studio for 2 weeks. And I was really like down about it, because we'd got a little bit of development money, so it was kind of happening. But I couldn't fly to the UK. And I was walking down the street, and I bumped into a friend of mine on the corner of the street in Brooklyn. He's a creative director at an advertising agency in New York. He's also a guitarist. And I was just like, my head was down. I was like, oh God, they're going into studio in 3 days. I can't get over there. I can't send Ula in. What we're going to do. And he stood there and said, you know what, you just go and get GoPros. And he did like this air guitar on the street. He said, yeah, you know, you can flip a GoPro on this end and then use it, use this kind of like low-tech, lo-fi way. Why don't you just try that? And I was like, oh my God, what a great idea. So I gave him a hug and then like jogged back to where I lived in Brooklyn. Just just felt like this like light bulb moment that I didn't have to get a really good cinematographer in there. And I spoke to Ula about it, and she said, yeah, these 360 cameras have just come out. You should check them out. So I checked out these GoPro 360 cameras, and then found a place in Glasgow that had 2 of them. And I called like a young photography assistant that I know in Glasgow to go and buy them and drive to Warwickshire. This is kind of how crazy it was. Mogwai were already recording. And so I looked at the map of the studio on their website and told the band where to move them. So we rolled for like 3 days, and we used a lot of it in the film. And then from there, I was using Zoom calls. Stuart from the band was filming things himself. The moment I gave up on this, or moved away from this idea of it being all shot on, you know, making like a cinematic experience, it really opened it up then. It just became open then. I could shoot in anything. So it was cool. It was like, now iPhones are in, now we can shoot on GoPro. It's kind of user generated. It opened it up, and then it was great.
Amazing. You mentioned development money. So am I allowed to ask a few questions around this? Because obviously, like, you know, that in itself is no mean feat. And obviously the project started, like you said, as one thing and then very quickly became something else. So if I can just sort of understand this, your friend, your ad guy that you bumped into on the street in Brooklyn, that was when it was in its original, sort of the original brief, which was, we're writing a record. We want you to basically record this process. It's a big one for us. And that's what you were commissioned to do. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then with the development money, was that from the label or from somewhere else?
Well, actually, it came from Screen Scotland. The project started about 3 months before that, before COVID, like December 19. Mogwai were playing in New York, and I got a call from Stuart saying, I'm in town, can you meet for a pint on Tuesday night? I want to speak to you about something. So I went and met Stuart, and we had a pint in a pub in Brooklyn. Mogwai's manager, Ray, came, and the three of us sat around a table, and Stuart said, I want to make a film, I'd love you to do it. We're touring around Scotland, should we do it? And Ray, Mogwai's manager, he'd heard about it for the first time also. So we plotted in this pub to make something. And Ray had used to work for Screen Scotland, which are a kind of arts funding, like film funding body in Scotland, who are fantastic.
Yeah.
And Ray said, this is a great idea. I can speak to those guys tomorrow. I'm sure they'll be into it. So very quickly, we were on the phone with Screen Scotland about this idea, and they loved it. They're all huge Mogwai fans. Very quickly, they were like, we love this idea, and we'd love to help you with it. So we got a production company in Glasgow who they suggested, and we got a little bit of development money, to get going. And at that point in like feature films or feature documentaries like this, you get development money. It's like a feasibility, actually.
Yeah.
It's like a little chunk just to see if you can make something. And if it goes anywhere, they give you more. So that's a typical, that was a process I did not understand. It was like a new thing for me. So you get development money. It might have been 20 grand or something like that. I can't quite remember. Just to hire some cameras, make a little bit. And then we were expected then just to present to Screen Scotland like a little 5-minute little thing that we'd made, like a little test.
Like a teaser sort of thing.
Yeah. A proof of concept, I guess you could call it. Providing that goes well and it looks like there's a film to be made, then you get more and you get more money, and then it goes into a whole other process. We have to find industry financing also.
So then basically December 2019, obviously that's, like you say, 3 months before COVID hit. So in that 3 months, had you already made something?
No, we were just getting going. We were just booking hotels in the Highlands of Scotland. We were booking crew. We were just like beginning to mobilise towards this small tour film. And then COVID arrived, and very quickly the gigs in Scotland got cancelled. But we still had this development money, and we still had let's just keep going and see where it takes us. Screen Scotland were still on board. There was no real plan. You know, as you remember, like things just started closing and shutting, and plans were changing.
Mad.
Airports were closing, or borders were closing. And so it was just, let's just keep going.
Did you have any other projects that you were working on or were being commissioned, or everything in that direction stopped?
Yeah, everything has stopped. Yeah, you know, I do a lot of commercials. I moved up into countryside as well, so I was kind of like holed up. So it was a real worry. But bumping into my friend on the street, who kind of air guitared and pointing at GoPros. Yeah, that was it. That was like a light bulb
Let's
moment.
give him a shout. Who was this guy? What's his name?
Jonathan Santana.
Great name.
Yeah.
There you go.
He's a great guy. He's a really great creative director in New York. He's a good pal. But I was just determined to keep going. And Mogwai planned to release in November, which means you have to record it in March and April, and they mix it. And it's a real like strategy. So they had this plan to release a record regardless. So it was just all moving at that point. This whole machine, the Mogwai machine, was moving. So their producer was booked in. And the interesting, how can I put this? The fortuitous kind of workflow for the band is their producer is a guy called Dave Fridman, who has a studio in Buffalo, New York. And that's like a 7-hour drive from where I live. And he was remotely producing the albums on Zoom, like a live kind of feed between the two studios.
Yeah.
So I sent GoPros into the studio in England, and I decided to drive to Buffalo with another GoPro and put it in Dave's studio, or give it to Dave. Dave was very worried about COVID, so wouldn't let me in the studio. So I had to leave at the end of his drive. And Dave would come out, pick up the GoPro. I'd show him, I'd yell at him from across the street how to turn it on, because he didn't want to get within 20 feet of me. And Dave carried a GoPro into his studio and pressed record. So there was cameras rolling in Warwickshire and in Buffalo for a few days on two different camera systems, on two different GoPros. Nice. And we came out with 70 hours of GoPro footage over 3 days, which I had to edit myself and go through and try and find a story in it. And so that's that.
Like
and
you
that's
said,
all
you
we
had time on your hands. That was sort of the weird sort of, blessing and a curse what happened.
Yeah, and this GoPro system that we use, they're not designed for anything like this. What people attach to surfboards and things. And
like extreme sports.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
So what it does, it creates 4-minute clips that don't really have unique names. So I had like tons, it was days and days and days of this material, and it wasn't like in order. So I had like hundreds of 4-minute clips that you couldn't use a piece of software to put them together. And it took me a month sat eyeballing these clips and putting them next together. When you edit film, you call it like a string where you put it all together so it makes sense. So I had to look at the last 10 seconds, hear what they were saying, and then like a jigsaw, find the other bit and put it next to it and then move to the next bit. It was just a big soup, and that's all I had. And then there was like a eureka moment of me looking at it where there was a camera rolling in the UK and I could see Dave talking, and he said, "Oh, that's magic." And I found the bit in Buffalo where he said, "That's magic." So I had 2 recordings of the same moment. So I could kind of like sync it together.
Well done, Dave.
And then we edited like a big part of the film with that footage. So,
yeah. Well done. You're a patient man. It's a virtue, as they say.
Yeah.
So at what point then did you join the band?
It might have been May 2020, May, June.
Okay.
I think the airport's open in a way that my family and I could travel to Glasgow, but we'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks. So we travelled over, and then with the plan to shoot some stuff with them live and do some interviews. And it felt like quite an intense thing to do, actually. I remember when we were leaving for the airport, the day that we were travelling, my little boy stood at the top of the stairs. And he said to me, "Why are we coming?" I was like, oh my God. I was like, I didn't know, and I couldn't answer him. I was like, I don't know. I had doubts about going and doubts about travelling and COVID and just doubts about this myself and about, is it even possible? What am I doing? And we can't get crew. We can't get cameras. We had nothing planned, nothing set up, but I just wanted to do it. You know, I wanted to find a way making this film. And my little boy, like, you know, like kids are really honest when they just say things. He wasn't meaning it like cutting. He just asked me like, why are we coming? Like, why are we going? I don't think he wanted to go. And it just broke my heart. And then we got to JFK, it was completely empty. There's no one there. They just opened the flights. And we pushed my children through an empty airport with all masks on. We got on an empty plane and flew to Glasgow. And then we got there, quarantined for 2 weeks in this little fishing village. And then that was it. I could travel to Glasgow, meet the band, film a little bit. So that was it. That's how it started. And the first interview I arranged, like the first proper interview for the film, I knew I had something. It was with Ian Rankin, actually.
In the pub?
In the pub, yeah. I got in contact with Ian Rankin through the band. He's like a really big fan of the band. And I got in contact with him. I said, I'm going to be in Edinburgh. Would you do this? And he was like, of course, I love Mogwai. And he agreed with this interview. There's nowhere open. I couldn't hire any cameras because nowhere was open, no camera rental. I had a GoPro and a little microphone, and I found a pub. I actually know Edinburgh really well. I lived there. I studied there. So I found a pub that I really liked that agreed to it. They were closed. They said, no, we'll open it because we love Mogwai and we love Ian Rankin. We'll come and open it for you. So I went and sat in this pub with him, just me and him, and interviewed him for 2 hours. And his interview was amazing. What he said, it just... I know you've seen it, Laura, so you know like, some of the words he said, but he just talked about the connection this music has with the landscape, the light and the dark, and that Scottish culture and the history of storytelling and the art that's created in Scotland, and the way Mogwai's music connects to that. And he was just so articulate, so eloquent. It was just a beautiful, and it just blew me away. And I sat with him for an hour and a half, something like that, and I left him, shook his hand, and I walked across Edinburgh to where I'd parked the car, and like all these words that were just like echoing in my head, just like the words that he said about this, like the soul of like the Scottish landscape, and how you connect that to Scottish literature, and you can connect that to where Mogwai are and their music, and it was just so good. And that was the first interview, and I knew after that I had a film. I knew there was like a film now because I've got this, and it was just mega. And I went back and I edited this interview with a piece of Mogwai music, and it just sounded and felt amazing. I was like, great, I've got it. So from Ian Rankin,
that was the moments you needed to be there.
Yeah. No, I didn't need to be there. Yeah, I did. And then the first day we came out of quarantine, after spending 2 weeks in this little fishing hut, I walked out and it was like the sun was setting over this little fishing village we're in, and I photographed this seagull just like flying out at sunset. And it's a really beautiful, poetic shot of this bird flying out to sea. And I sent it to Stuart saying, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. That's actually something we've been saying to each other a lot in this project, like where there's a will, there's a way. And that ended up being the poster for the film. The bird kind of pops up a lot in the film. And it just reminded me of that book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which I love. It's like a self-help book from the 60s. And it's about you don't have to fly with the flock. Just do one thing at a time, as beautiful as possible. And I love it.
Well, it's like the anthem of the band themselves, isn't it? Sort of like they make the music, they let it go, they let it fly. They don't come at anything from a traditional point of view. They're doing it because they love it, and that's who they are. You know, that sentiment about sort of letting something out into the world and just letting it find its destination, and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what we're doing now. Yeah, that's happening this week. What I enjoyed about this way of making work also is, with Ian Rankin in the pub that day, it was just me, and I had a little camera and I recorded the sound myself. I had a little lav mic, but I booked the location, I found the pub and met him and arranged it with him. It just came down to me and him in a pub, and I came out with that material. I didn't need anyone else. I didn't need like a crew. I didn't need like sound people or camera crew or anyone. It was just me and him. And I turned up with all the equipment myself and did it and left. And I love that. I love making work. I love being able to make work in that way. I think often you don't need more than that sometimes. If you've got the right material and an idea, you can just make it with nothing. And I get inspired and excited when that happens, actually.
Like you mentioned, there's these sort of moments of glue and how the having watched the film, you've also got these fabulous stories from fans, sort of these moments, sort of the journey and their relationship to the band as well. And I was wondering, how did you get hold of those people? How do you cast them? Or maybe it was much more sort of natural than that.
Well, from the very beginning of this project, I was looking for a way to include the fans. What I've noticed about Mogwai is the way people respond to the music. If anyone takes a moment to look at any Mogwai tracks on YouTube, there's always like tens of thousands of people commenting on it. People go there as a place to like talk about how they were feeling and like what it meant to them that time they heard it. And it's very personal. Like, it's quite incredible, actually. People just use it as like a platform to talk about a part of their life that was difficult or a part of their life that was happy, and now they listen to this piece of music at that time. And it's kind of amazing and beautiful. And there's one track, I can't actually remember the name of it. I think it's Take Me Somewhere Nice it is. And it's just like, it's not even Mogwai's YouTube, it's some fans put it up there. And it's got something like 40,000 comments on it, going back for like 10 years. And it's people just pouring their hearts out about this track. And then fans would respond and offer advice. It's like a chat room for people and it's heartbreaking, some of the stories, and beautiful at the same time. It's just human. It's just so wonderful. And I reached out to the person whose YouTube page it was, and I was going to interview them. And I reached out to some of the fans. I wanted to find a way of like presenting this thing that Mogwai fans do, is they internalise and look at themselves and their life and just in a really beautiful way and write these things that are just so poetic and so wonderful and human. So I wanted to find a way of using that in the film and presenting it. And I hadn't figured it out. I don't know. I knew it was like, I had to be like a big part of the story. And then Mogwai were performing in Glasgow in 21, I think it was. And it was their first show in Scotland for like 3 years since lockdown, started since COVID. And they were performing their new album at the Royal Concert Hall. And I decided I was going to come over and film it. And it felt like the end of the film, which, spoiler alert, it kind of is. And I felt like it was going to be a great moment for them to like walk out on stage to the home crowd and play this record for the first time in 3 years. And we kind of built a plan for me to come over and shoot this. And then I just thought how interesting it could be to like get fans to document their journey. And I thought it was an opportunity to get in contact with lots of Mogwai fans and have them send me like material. So the producers and I decided to like put an advert out, and actually kind of went viral. Like Rolling Stone did a story on it, NME did a story on it, where I created an email address and I asked fans to document their journey from where they live to the Mogwai show and talk a little bit about their connection with the band and what it means to them, and just any stories or anecdotes they could remember about, like when they first heard them or anything like that. Originally, the producers were like, which is normal for them, they want to like take work off me. They're like, we'll just handle the emails. We'll just send out like a blanket response on what you need to do, like how you shoot it, that kind of thing. And I said, well, actually, I'd like to be on the email. I'd like it to come from me. So I got the logins and I dealt with all these emails. And then I just got bombarded with like Mogwai fans asking about what they want, so I replied to everyone. I took the time to kind of reply to every single person personally and say, this is what I'm doing, the reason for the film, and I'm a Mogwai fan. And I wanted to connect with these people on that level. I didn't want it to be just an email off of some production person saying, do this, do that.
Yeah.
So I'd already got a relationship with all these people at this point. I think it was like 60 odd people I'd written emails to. So anyway, these people then went off. I told them like to film everything landscape, for example, a few technical guidelines of what they can try and do. And then that was it. And the gig happened. And then after that, I started, the days after the show, I started getting these WeTransfer links to all this material that they'd sent, and it was just unbelievable. People travelled from all over the world, and they'd film the journeys from Norway, and it's all over the place.
And here is my boss.
And it was just, then the material that we got was just unbelievable. I just wasn't expecting just what we got. Some of the stories that people had, that they shared.
I was 15 years old.
About leading their connection. It was just like amazing, beautiful, wonderful, human, heartbreaking, magical moments.
I just remember pulling up one of the orange plastic chairs, and then Mogwai started to play, and it was just this massive wall of sound. It just hit you, and I was just gone.
One guy talked about, in 1995, his brother gave him like a scratchy old C60 tape of Mogwai 10 Rapid, like their first EP, and his brother got him into this band, and and he always remembers that day he got into them, and he told his brother had passed away recently, and the gig tonight is going to remind me of his brother and the loss, also the beauty, and it was just like incredible.
Tonight's going to be bittersweet.
Originally, I thought the fans bit was just going to be a little bit, actually. But when I saw how incredible this material was that we got, I expanded it to be like a whole chapter of the film, like, or nearly like a whole part of the film, because it was just so magic. And so Alex and Richard, they were two main fans. The material that you see in the film is what they provided. They just shot it themselves and sent it to us. And then when I realised just how amazing this stuff was, I actually reached out to them first and said, I want to grow it in the film and make it into a bigger part of it. I wanted to check with them they were still cool with it, because what they were talking about was very personal stories of their struggle, basically. Yeah. And I wanted to confirm with them that they were okay, again, for me to use this. And they said they were. So I started editing it, started working on it, and then I wanted to expand their story. So I went back and said, do you have any other material you can share? Richard, who's lost his brother, sent me like home videos of him and his brother. Alex, the girl who also had another similar, she had a difficult time, and Mogwai's music helped to get through it. She sent me home videos also. So I built these stories. And then when I finished the edit, I sent it to them first. Before the band saw it, I wanted them to see what I'd done with the material and have their approval. And Richard, whose brother died, shared it with his mother and all that, and was happy. And then from there, everyone else saw it. And we created like my favourite part of the film there. It kind of gets me every time I watch that.
It'll remind me of the gift that my brother gave me, which is a lifelong love of the most amazing band I think I've ever heard, but it will also remind me of the loss and how much I miss him.
That's how deeply music touches us, and that experience to music, to hear it from the actual people who had the experience as opposed to secondhand. It's so personal, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the fact that they're sort of self-recording,
That layers removed, how it makes you feel like when you look at this, in that Royal Concert Hall, there's 3,000, 4,000 people there, and everyone's got the stuff, haven't they? Everyone's got their own story, and it just makes you realise, you've got to be kind to everybody, haven't you? Because everyone's fighting a tough battle, aren't they? And that was just two examples of people in that room, and these two people, Alex and Rich, who they're huge Mogwai fans, and now what I love about this film is then they are now part of Mogwai's story, and now the day that Richard's brother gave him that tape in 1995 is now part of Mogwai's story as well. You know what I mean? And I love that.
Yeah.
There were times in this film where celebrities came into the picture a little bit, where we could have got celebrities to talk about the band. A lot of big musicians love Mogwai. Not going into too many details, but there's like big music celebrities and people that we could have brought in and sat them down and made it into that. And me and Stuart from the band, we just thought, I think we're different to that. It's like beyond that a little bit. And those fans that Alex stood at a bus stop on the way to Mogwai gig talking about her day, like, that was more important to me. It feels it's just real life. That's more powerful to me than having a celebrity talk about how much they like this band. It felt way more interesting and more beautiful to me to do that.
No, I respect that. It's very much like the human journey and the human connection and everything that comes as a result of that, which brings me nicely to asking you about, on top of the fan stuff, what about the archive, the music, the audio and the Zoom calls like you mentioned? How was it decided what went in there and where did that archive actually come from? There's so much texture and layering to it all.
It was difficult getting all that together, actually. Yeah, I got given so much. I got given like hours and hours of footage.
Like from the band or the label or just
It came from Mogwai's record label, which they run. They have their own record label. They had like bins of VHS tapes from over the years, and they'd been digitized at different times. So I just received like big, like massive WeTransfer links to these digitized clips. They're just like home videos that they'd shot over the years. A lot of them, the early stuff, they did like a tour in Europe in like the late 90s, loads and that. The first tour of America, first tour of Australia. So a lot from like the late 90s, early 2000s. It wasn't in order. It was like a big soup of mashed up footage of clips that weren't labelled. And I just screened it all. I just watched it all. And then throughout the production, I was getting more and more from friends of theirs and other people in Glasgow that kind of knew them around that time. And so I just kept getting sent hours and hours of it. And I just sat and watched it all. And that's the only way to do it. You've got to sit and watch it. And it just took weeks to do that.
How did you decide what could make the cut?
I just pulled out bits that I found interesting, charming and beautiful, really. And like, what was important for me is when you get like, you know, a young band traveling around the world, getting success, like, there's lots of like them being rowdy, a lot of like cliche stuff really. And I didn't want it to be that. I didn't want it to be shots of people jumping about in hotel rooms and being rowdy and being rock, because I just wanted to be a bit more soulful than that really. So there's none of that. There's none of like a young rock band kind of throwing TVs around, which I could have done that. Could easily have been that. It just felt a bit cheap and a bit obvious and a bit like uninteresting to me.
And not very you, not very them.
Yeah,
it's sort of like the sentiment around something. It's like much deeper than that. It's much deeper than that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's more beautiful on a different level. And then, you know, from a technical point of view, when I watched it and it wasn't in any order, it didn't make any sense. It'd be like walking down the street in Mexico. Someone's filming like a back street in Mexico and suddenly it'd cut to a gig in Reading. Then suddenly there'd be like a home video of someone like pushing a pram down a beach. Then it'd be like 30 seconds of a gig in New Zealand. Then it'd be like 19 minutes on a bus. I like the way it felt, just jumping from one bit to another, not really exactly knowing why you were there, and just it felt quite trippy and quite immersive. And so I used that technique in the film where archive goes and sits next to each other from different times. You don't really know why, but it just makes sense somehow. It just feels in their head somehow. I don't know, like a dream to me a little bit. So yeah, that was I carried that, the process of reviewing hours and hours of archive, what it felt like watching it, brought it into the edit as well.
So it's more about the mood than the chronology of events.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another thing. We didn't timestamp anything. Again, it didn't feel as interesting to me, that really. It could have been like 1998. And then as the project continued, we started looking for specific bit. We needed, like, for example, there's a guy called Alex Kapranos, who's the lead singer of Franz Ferdinand. He gave Mogwai their first gig. He ran a club in Glasgow called the 13th Note. And it was just like...
Was that him?
Yeah, Alex Kapranos.
He had like an open mic night.
Yeah.
Like a dive bar or something.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And he gave lots of people their first gigs in a club called the 13th Note. It's called the Kazoo Club.
That's right.
And it was, legendary. And Mogwai had their first gig there. And it was a small kind of, you paid £1 in. So I was looking for footage of that, for example. No one had ever seen footage of Mogwai at the Kazoo Club. And I managed to find a bit. There were moments of archive that we were looking for that was very forensic. You know, it was like people crawling around in the lofts, finding tapes in boxes and that they'd never seen before. They'd never digitised. So it was a lot of that for months of people trying to find tapes and things for us. Yeah.
Wicked.
Yeah.
I've got a great visual when you say that. So good.
Yeah.
And Antony, let's go to sound design. When you're making a music documentary about a band, where do you even start in relation to thinking about the sound design of the film? Like, does the band have a say in that, for example?
On this occasion, they did not know. I just went ahead of it. It was just feeling my way through it, really. It was just feeling my way through the film. And I'd get to a point and I know Mogwai's music very well, and I'd just pull in different Mogwai tracks that I felt worked with a certain moment, really. And that was it. They gave me their new album as separate stems. When musicians make albums, they create stems where it's a different kind of all the different elements of the tracks. So that was just like a whole bin full of like synths and bass and drums and like weird kind of like synth noise that they create and reverbs and things. We create Mogwai songs. So I used that, so I just dipped into that and I just felt my way through it, really.
So you just had free reign.
Yeah.
You had free reign to use
Full
all of that
free reign,
stuff.
Yeah.
Mad.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Obviously, as a friendship, so the trust had been established personally, but it's turned into a much bigger beast, you know? Did you have to sort of show them anything, or how did you want to, or did they ask to see anything at any point, just to sort of check what direction it was going?
I've worked with them for a long time on lots of projects, and so we have got a trust for sure, and we're good pals, and we just work well together and in that way. And I would send Stuart chapters every now and then. Every few months I'd send him a little bit, and it would just be great, good stuff, keep going, it's great. It'd be a thumbs up and a text message, it'd be like that. And then I'd carry on. And there was one picture note where there was, so I won't say who he was, but there was a band member's ex-girlfriend like in a shot that they wanted to take out. He didn't like that. and that, you know, a bit of archive, like a little bit of archive. And it was like, yeah. And that was the only thing. That was the only thing. That's probably unusual. They were just really happy with the choice of music, the structure of it. There was minimal comments on anything, actually. And yeah, they do work like that, actually, the band. They are Mogwai they find people that they like working with and just let them do it, basically, it seems. Yeah. I noticed that really early on, working with them with like music videos. You do a music video for them, you'd send it to them, you wouldn't even get a response, it'd just be... It's almost like with them, because they're so modest and they're from Glasgow and they have this kind of very Glaswegian way about talking about themselves. They're so modest, it's hardwired into them. Them making any comment on their own image, it's almost like they'd be showing off to do that. To even acknowledge it even exists in a funny way. It's kind of weird. I guess that's what it is, yeah.
I mean, you could almost say they're like the dream collaborators.
Yeah.
Because they're sort of trusting you with their story, essentially. I mean, for a band to give you stems and just be like, use them however you want, it's unheard of. You know, to let something play out and the integrity of where they're coming from, it just feels like this, and obviously the way that the fans respond to that, it's such a unique relationship in a lot of ways. They're involved in something in a much more sort of holistic way, or their approach is much more holistic, and you've taken that and you've made that into a film. You've given that a visual representation along with their sound.
Yeah, it describes their personalities, I agree. Yeah, it describes them as people, it describes them as artists, it describes how they work. And I'm very grateful, very lucky. I'm sure most films about bands don't go as smoothly because there's different ego. I mean, that's it with the Mogwai, they don't have ego. They're not ego guys at all. They're not vain, they don't have egos, which just gives you space to make something good. It does feel like it is one person's point of view, you know, it's one very specific point of view on a subject. If there was multiple people chipping in on it, it might not have been as effective, I think, yeah.
I know Mogwai asked you to make the film, but as it went on, who were you making the film for? Who was the audience that was in your mind?
I was making it for the people that hear the music in the same way that I do. Yeah, that's what I was making it for. I was making it for the band. Although, of course, you know, you can watch this film and have no idea, have no interest in the music or who these people are. And that's what I love about the film. I love that it connects to a high story and it's about so much more. But I wanted it to be like, I guess, like my present to those people that kind of love this music like I do. So I think that's what it was, actually, yeah. But yeah, no, I just got a text off Stuart from the band, actually. We're going to screening later, and like we've got another screening now. It's like a smaller one. There's like 80 people going to be there. And there's a couple of really big Mogwai fan sites where people obsess about them. And I sent Stuart a message this morning saying I want to get as many fans in there tonight. And I think that answers my question, actually. I want like Mogwai fans to be there tonight and not loads of like salesy Hollywood people, you know what I mean? Which, having those people there at the screening, it feels more important to me now. I'm more kind of excited about that, actually.
I just want to ask you very quickly, if I may. Obviously, the film was about the band and they gave you all the access, you know, but the film got bigger, obviously, from what it started as. So as that happened, it needed more money to come into it. So were there any stakeholders outside of the band that needed certain assurances, or, you know, that watching the edits, or they were, you know, commenting on what could or could not be integrated for whatever reason?
There were, yeah. Screen Scotland were a big stakeholder and they had notes and thoughts on it, but we're always in harmony. They liked what we were making and they were very great about delivering notes. And part of their deal was, we'll give you the more money if you also find some industry financing. We'll match that. So it's then out on us to kind of get backing from other people. So we got some investors also, an Italian distribution company who loved the band, who loved the film, and were very excited to be part of it. And they came through RSA, actually. So they became stakeholders, and they were, because of that, we're in a position to give notes and give thoughts and make suggestions on how the film should be. They didn't really. They just loved it. They just got it. They got the project and they were like, this is going to work. Keep going.
Amazing. And at what stage did they come in?
They came in probably 2/3 the way through. We needed more money to finish it. And in order for Screen Scotland to complete their funding, we needed to demonstrate that we'd found industry financing. Getting industry financing, it was a kind of a condition of Screen Scotland coming in to finance some of it. So it's probably about 3/4 the way in. They came maybe 2/3. And we had a film by then at that point, actually. We just needed money to finish it, like the post and clearing all the archive. Like on projects like this, we need to pay BBC for all this material. And we use like TV channels in Spain and France and Japan. And we're now spending, I don't know, 100 grand clearing, paying to use footage and radio clips and stuff. So that's where their money's going, basically.
Thank you for sharing that side of it as well, because the money stuff is always the stuff that doesn't typically get spoken about. It's sort of the truth of it, you know?
Yeah. And what my advice, like, you know, anyone attempting something like this, on independent films like this, the money, you just got to believe in the project and believe, how can I put it? I basically put my own money in without intending to. You know, I was like buying flights and doing stuff. We didn't have the money, you know, but I was like buying stuff and like keeping the receipts. And that's me. And the producers have been doing, Kiri, who's amazing. She's a producer. She's been doing the same. You just believe in the project and it's the right thing and you're going to make something special. So you have to commit. You commit physically, financially, emotionally. You just have to commit and put that in, and you have to, because it won't get made otherwise. It won't get made. So
it's massive. You got to keep the show on the road, you know? That's the bigger picture. And the belief it goes further and it will come back.
Yeah.
And it does. It really does. Listen, in the creative blood spirits, I cannot let you go without answering 5 quick fire questions.
Okay.
These are 5 cheeky questions. Answer as briefly as you possibly can.
Okay.
Right. Number 1, who's your favourite band member?
I can't say that. They're all the same.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a serious answer. They're all absolute legends. They're all amazing to know.
All 4. Okay. Is there anyone that you missed off the credits?
Yeah.
Go on.
I can't say because he'll kill me, so I need to put it back on.
Okay, cool. Name the one person that you didn't know before shooting this film, making this film, but that you need to stay in contact with now.
Ian Rankin.
Okay, is this quote true or false? The name Mogwai has no significant meaning and the band have always intended on getting a better one.
True. Yeah.
Fifth and final question. Where can we watch the documentary here in the UK?
Well, it'll be in the cinemas in the UK later this year. And then beyond that, like probably one of the streamers, we've got a very exciting conversation going with one of the very big streamers at the moment that saw it, that came the other day. So,
does it start with a and end with an?
No, it doesn't.
Does it start with and end with a?
Hold on a minute. Yes.
Go on, keep going.
Yeah, so that's a hope. Yeah, I want people to see it in the cinema. That's my plan. It's a big sound, this film, and it's a big picture. I prefer it to people see it in the cinema first, and that'll be later this year.
Amazing. It's making me smile what we just said, because there's your money back.
Yeah,
that's what happens.
I know.
You see? That's what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, look, a quick concluding question. So the film concludes with the band's sentiment that once the music is out, it doesn't belong to the band anymore. It belongs to the fans. Do you feel the same way about your films?
Yeah, I do. We've created this thing together and we're going to send it out, and it's on its way now, and I've done the best I can, and I couldn't have given any more. I wanted to make a film that the band deserve, and I hope people think that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It means a lot to hear the journey behind the piece itself. It doesn't take away from the magic. It actually shows what it took to get it done. And that's typically not what people have the opportunity to hear. So thank you, and
thank you.
Appreciate you sharing everything. I can't wait for it to be out in the world and for it, to go fly, and, for everything to come back.
Oh, thank you. It means a lot.
Thank you so much, Antony.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, wicked. If you enjoyed this episode, don't miss a single drop by subscribing and following the Creative Blood podcast. You can also head over to creativeblood.com, where you'll find even more inspiration from pioneering creative disruptors in fashion, music, film, art and entertainment. Let's get all these conversations out there and shared with fellow creatives. These episodes were crafted by the brilliant humans at Creative Blood and Scenery Studios. Thanks for listening.